Hi everybody, welcome to another video in my Intro to HTML series. I think that the topic of this video is probably the most important one of the entire course here. I want to talk about semantics. Semantics is the study of meaning. It's actually a school of philosophy. But when we talk about semantics in regard to HTML, what we're talking about is the meaning that's provided to content through HTML tags and elements. So what does that mean? How have we been doing that? How are we going to do that in the future? Let's look at some code. This is a page that I built in previous lessons. And it's got a header with an H1, it's got an article with an H2, it's got some paragraphs, and it's got more articles below. And it's got a footer down at the bottom with a paragraph and the small type tag. If I look at this in the browser, essentially it just looks like plain text. There are no colors added, there's no special white spacing added, most of the fonts are roughly the same size. In other words, we have not addressed the idea of display at all yet. And we're not going to in this lesson either. All I'm going to talk about in this lesson is using HTML to provide structure or meaning. Let's go back to the code. So semantics, how does it relate to HTML? Well, here's the deal. When a web browser opens up an HTML document, if it's not semantically marked up, in other words, if it does not have tags and stuff like that, all the browser sees and all that a search engine sees is a series of characters thrown together. Browsers don't have the understanding of context. In other words, they're not going to look at these words next to each other, headings and how to use them, and get some kind of a meaning out of it. Browsers aren't that smart. The human brain is pretty darn smart. When we look at words next to each other, those words are coupled together, and in our brain we make connections, and when those words are put together, they provide more meaning than just one word alone. A browser doesn't have that ability. In fact, there are no computers out there that really have the ability to truly understand context. So we have to provide context and we have to provide meaning to these random, seemingly random strings of characters. They appear to be random to a browser or a search engine. So we have to provide meaning. We have to make sure that the browsers and the search engine know the functions and the meaning of those chunks of text. So what I have here is my header. The browser knows that the purpose of a header is to introduce information for an entire document. The header of a document is usually going to contain a title, maybe it's going to contain a byline, maybe it's going to contain a date. It's all that stuff that would introduce an entire document and summarize what that document is going to talk about. So when the browser sees this, the meaning of this content has now been changed. It doesn't care about the words intro to HTML. What it cares about is this is the chunk of text that introduces the whole document. Inside of there's an H1. The H1 provides that meaning that this is the most important heading of the document. This is the heading that introduces the entire document. So just by adding these tags, I've provided meaning to this seemingly random chunk of text. In other words, the browser thinks it's random. Now the browser knows that it's a heading. Article. When a browser sees the article tag, it has some semantic meaning. The semantic meaning for the article tag is anything that's between the opening and closing article tag is content that's directly related to one another. So what we've done is we've provided semantic links between this line of text, this big chunk of text, this big chunk of text, this big chunk of text, and any images, any sounds, any figures of any kind that we put inside of that article. The browser knows that it's all connected. So if it sees a word down here, maybe it sees Maximus here, and it sees Maximus here, and it sees Maximus up here somewhere. It knows those three Maximus words are connected to one another and that they are meant to work together as a group. Okay? Tags provide semantic structure to a document. They give that document meaning in a way that it otherwise would not have to a browser or a search engine. You might ask why this even matters. Why is this even important? All I want to do is put a web page up on the web and make it display in a way that's going to look pretty. Well, displaying something on the web and making it look pretty isn't the only thing. If you want your pages to be found by search engines, there needs to be some meaning that those search engines can understand. You have to have some semantic connections in between things in your document. For example, part of a search engine crawling algorithm is to look for headings. Okay? It's going to look at the outline of your document, and it's going to look for H1s, and it's going to look for relevant H1s. So in other words, if I'm doing a web search for Intro to HTML web pages, if I've got the H1 here that says Intro to HTML, this might have a slightly higher rank in a search engine algorithm. If I don't have that H1 there, this page is going to drop in the search engine ranking. So that's kind of important. It helps for what's called search engine optimization if you have a properly semantically marked up page. Another thing that it does is it provides meaning, and it provides a structure that screen readers or other technologies, adaptive technologies, can link to. So what is a screen reader and what's an adaptive technology? Well, screen readers and adaptive technologies provide a way for people who have some sort of impairment to interact with a page. Let's say somebody is visually impaired. They can't see very well. Well, that means they can't read the words that are on your web page. So what has to happen is they have to have some sort of adaptive technology that's going to allow them to interact with the web page. What a screen reader does is it reads to the user what's on the page. Well, that's great. If you have a properly marked up page, some of the things that the screen reader does is it looks for handles. Some of those handles are going to be things like headings. You can choose headings and very easily tab through them to find the chunk of content that you want to read or you want to parse. If you don't have headings in there, if you don't have headings done correctly, the screen readers are not going to be able to effectively crawl through the page. That's a big problem. There's this thing called the American Disabilities Act, and what it says is that all things that are considered a public space need to be accessible to all people of all ability levels. And that translates to the web as well. Well, things are kind of up in the air right now as far as regulations go, but there was a regulation that was to be enacted in 2018 that would force all web pages that are considered a public space that all people should have access to be fully usable by people who are impaired. That means you would have to have semantically marked up pages. You would have to have things like alt tags. You have to have all sorts of things in your web page that make sure that all people can use it. In other words, you want to have your page marked up in such a way that screen readers can use them and use them effectively. If you don't have that, after 2018 when those regulations come into effect, you could receive fines or takedown notices or things like that. So it's really important that you learn how to semantically mark up a page correctly. We're not going to go into all of the rules for compliant web pages, but I'm going to give you the basic structure that you need to make sure that you're in line with it. So as you learn more, you'll make sure that you're totally in line when these regulations take effect. So that's a little bit about why semantics is important. 1, helps search engines. SEO is very important. 2, helps with adaptive technologies and makes sure that your web pages are accessible to all people. And 3, the last thing is to provide what would be called a semantic web on the internet. I'm not going to get too much into semantic web right now, but essentially it means that all the content on the internet is connected in a meaningful way. You're not going to have content throughout the internet connected in meaningful ways if you don't have proper use of headings or proper use of articles. You can't make meaningful connections between one page and another without those types of handles or those types of tags in your markup. All right, so semantics. Semantics does not care about the way things display in the browser. It cares about creating a meaningful structure or a meaningful outline to a page. Now, what are some good semantic elements? All the elements that we've been using are good semantic elements. Header, H1, article, H2, paragraph, strong, M. These are things that are semantic tags. They provide meaning to the markup. We don't care about how they display, they provide meaning. Some things that are not semantic markup, and these things are not allowed. Center. Center is a great example of non-semantic markup. All center does is tells the browser and how this is going to be displayed. That's it. It doesn't say anything about the purpose or the function of that chunk of content. It just says how it's going to be displayed. It's not to be used. Font. This is another tag. All it does is talks about how this chunk of text is going to be displayed. It doesn't talk about what the meaning of it. It doesn't say, this text is a heading. It doesn't say that this text is a paragraph. All it does is says how it's going to be displayed using the font tag. These two sets of tags are not to be used. One, these sets of tags are deprecated. In other words, they're slated to be removed from the specification at a future point. So if you use them and they're removed from the specification and browsers no longer support them, then your page is broken. Secondly, they're non-semantic. They add no meaning to the page. All they do is talk about display. Do not use those. They're old school. We don't use them anymore. We think about semantics only and the structure of the page when we're using HTML. All right, so that's semantics. Semantics is meaning. We use the tags to provide meaning to the content. In a future video, we're going to talk about display. We're going to talk about how we can add style to the pages through CSS. Thanks for watching.